Good morning. I call this session of the Public Service Commission to order. Ms. Vigers, are there any changes to the final agenda?
There are no changes to the final agenda.
Thank you. Before moving to the agenda, I'll conduct a roll call of commissioners. When I call your name, please confirm that you are present. Commissioner Berman,
Present.
Commissioner Alisi, Commissioner Edwards,
Present.
Commissioner Howard,
Present.
Commissioner Valesky,
Here.
Commissioner Majori.
Present.
Thank you. Okay. We'll move to the regular agenda. Note for the audience, we're going to start with item 102. The discussion item today relates to the 2022 Pipeline Safety Performance Measures Report. It'll be presented by Valerica Orifage and Engineering Specialist number 2, and Jeffrey Klein, Kevin Spicer will be here available for questions. Valerica, please begin.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Valerica Orifage. I'm a Utility Engineering Specialist. It was on. Sorry about that. Good morning, Chair, Commissioners. My name is Valerica Orifage. I'm a Utility Engineering Specialist 2 with the Office of Energy System Planning and Performance, Pipeline Safety Section. Item number 102 is the 2022 Pipeline Safety Performance Measures Report and is for information only. Can we please stop the PowerPoint presentation? Thank you. The measures that make up this report is the result of joint efforts beginning in the 1990s between the 11 major gas distribution operators and the Department of Public Service. The report examined the results of local distribution companies, or LDCs for short, performance in specific areas that includes damage prevention, emergency response, and leak management for 2022, and the results of the staff's audits and investigation that verify compliance with the pipeline safety regulations in 2021. Overall, the data indicates that performance has improved for LDCs across the state over the 20-year period staff has been reporting performance to the Commission. Next slide, please. The first measure, damage prevention, measures the success of LDCs in minimizing damages to buried gas facilities caused by excavation or demolition activities. The damage prevention measure is broken down into 4 categories, and they are as follows. There are damages due to mismarks or inaccurate markings by the LDCs of its affected underground facility, LDCs and their contractors, third-party excavator errors, and no calls or failure of an excavator to provide notice of intent to excavate to the one-call notification system. In 2022, 2 of the 4 categories saw improvements in performance as follows. The no-call damage rate decreased from 0.37 per 1,000 one-call tickets in 2021 to 0.34 per 1,000 one-call tickets in 2022, or an 8% decrease. And operators and their contractors' damage rate also decreased, going down from 0.08 per 1,000 one-call tickets in 2021 to 0.07 per 1,000 one-call tickets in 2022, or a 12.6%. The other 2 categories saw a decrease in performance, and they are as follows. The mismarked damage rate increased slightly from 0.38 per 1,000 one-call tickets in 2021 to 0.40 per 1,000 one-call tickets in 2022, or a 5.3%. The last category is the third-party damage rate that also increased from 0.79 per 1,000 one-call tickets in 2021 to 0.89 per 1,000 one-call tickets in 2022, or a 12.7%. In 2022, the data shows a decrease in the number of one-call tickets with about 1.4%, or 11,039 less tickets and an increase in the number of total damages going from 1,312 to 1,359 in 2022. This resulted in a decline in the performance of the total damage rate, going from 1.62 per 1,001 toll tickets in 2021 to 1.7 per 1,001 toll tickets in 2022. However, a review of the data for the past 5 years, 2018 through 2022, shows a downward trend for all 4 categories, as well as for the total damage rate per 1,001 call tickets, as you can see on the graph. Next slide, please. The second measure, emergency response, reflects the LDC's ability to respond promptly to reports of leaks, odor, and emergency response. By examining the percentage of reports that were responded to within specific time intervals. The percentages and the intervals are as follows. The companies are to respond to 75% of emergency reports within 30 minutes. They are to respond to 90% within 45 minutes, and to respond to 95% within 60 minutes. Compared to 2021 and 2022, the LDC's performance for each of the emergency response time intervals slightly declined within about 1% range. Although in 2022 the performance declined, the company's response times still far exceeded the target's levels. The data over the 5-year period, 2018 through 2022, shows that the LDCs continue to improve their performance for this category, and staff believes that because in 2020 and 2021, there was less vehicle traffic due to the COVID pandemic, and LDC's performance was artificially improved during those years, with the traffic pattern returning back close to the pre-2020 level. The 2022 performance is more in line with what we would expect if those years, the 2020 and 2021, were eliminated. In general, the LDCs have continued to use technologies as GPS to quickly identify the most appropriate employee to respond, and have continued placing or adding personnel in certain geographical areas during the times of the day that have historically high volumes of emergency notifications. Next slide, please. The third measure is the leak management that examines the LDC's performance related to their leak inventories, in addition to the evaluations of leak discovered and leaks repaired. Potentially hazardous leaks include any leaks that require repair, which are type 1, type 2A, and type 2. Type 3 leaks, which do not have a prescribed repair time frame, they are considered to be non-hazardous and are required to be reevaluated during the next required leakage survey, or annually, whichever is sooner, to ensure that a public safety concern has not developed. While type 3 leaks are not expected to become a safety concern, LDCs continue to eliminate those types of leaks as a result of rate cases targets set forth for the annual total leak backlogs, because it reduces loss gas, reduces maintenance costs, the total number of emergency response, and any effect that persistent odor has on negatively impacting public awareness efforts. In general, all the LDCs have demonstrated improvement over the past several years. In 2022, the total year-end leak backlog improved by about 13.4%, going from 8,454 leaks in 2021 to 7,325, or 1,129 less leaks. The repairable year-end leak backlog slightly decreased, going from 41 leaks in 2021 to 44 leaks in 2022, and is down 96.3% when compared to 1,178 leaks in 2003. The total number of leaks discovered decreased by about 6.8% or 1,009 leaks, and the total number of leaks repaired also decreased by 9% or 1,566 leaks. Next slide, please. A review of the total leak backlog for the past 10 years, 2013 through 2022, also shows a downward trend for the total leak backlog, as we can see from the graph. This shows the positive effect that leak-prone pipe replacement has had on the leak management performance measures. Next slide, please. The fourth and the final measure, the LDCs are evaluated under compliance with the minimum pipeline safety regulations. This measure looks at non-compliance issues as identified by staff during annual audit activity. Each year, staff conducts statistically based audits and investigations on the LDCs to determine their compliance. Each non-compliance identified represents an area where an LDC failed to meet the minimum requirements as prescribed. In addition to audits and investigations to identify non-compliance with the minimum pipeline safety regulations, staff reviews the data for possibly areas of concerns, which in this context mean an issue that is not technically a violation, but it raises safety concerns. This is different from how the term has been used in prior commission orders related to local transmission planning. The data reported varies greatly from year to year, which is due in part to staff's 5-year audit cycle. Staff's audits and investigations occur on varying frequencies determined by the risk each regulation poses to the public safety. In 2021, staff identified non-compliances in all LDCs operating service territories. A review of the number of violations included by LDCs in 2021 shows that the number of violations significantly increased for 2 LDCs, while for the majority of the LDCs, the number of violations decreased. For those LDCs that showed an increase in the number of violations in 2021, the increase is primarily attributed to the LDC's misunderstanding or misinterpretation of the pipeline safety regulations with respect to inspections of service regulators and vents, maintenance of service line valves, and internal corrosion control, or inadequately documenting all pertinent steps of required inspections. After identifying and bringing those issues to LDC's attention, the LDCs have developed and implemented remediation plans, including retraining of their employees and revising documentation used to record inspections. Next slide, please. So as LDCs continue their outreach and education effort to excavator communities as well as to the general public, adopt better practices in responding to leak, odor, and emergency reports, and continue to replace leak-prone pipe, staff expects that further performance improvements will occur. Thank you, Chair, Commissioners. This concludes my presentation of the 2022 Pipeline Safety Performance Measures Report. I would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerica. Appreciate the presentation. Good job as always. I do have one question about the area of concern. For this particular report, we've always used that terminology for that particular group, right? Going back, that's my recollection. Is that correct? Okay, great. Just wanted to confirm that. Thank you. So I have no questions. I appreciate the work you guys have done, and seeing promising signs of continued improvement is always good, and looking forward to seeing this work continue apace. So thank you. Commissioner Berman?
Thank you. I am appreciative of what is generally good news on pipeline safety and our oversight of that. I do recognize also that on May 5th of this year, PHMSA proposed a new rule for gas pipeline leak detection and repair, and the engagement that's ongoing with pipeline reauthorization is really important, especially as we look at how rules, regulation, and any potential laws may impact us in the state, ensuring that we have the right funding and the right flexibility in working with folks in a positive path forward. I do think it's also important to continue our focus on repairing the leaks in the gas system to ensure safety, and I appreciate all that you're doing, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Commissioner Lisi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This was a result of incredible talent followed by hard work, and is good, or if not better than last week's briefing. It's very valuable to me personally and to all of us, so thank you.
Commissioner Edwards.
I have no comments. Thank you.
Sorry, Commissioner Edwards. I don't think we heard you on the mic. Would you mind moving it a little closer?
I have no comments. Thank you very much for the information.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. We're going to look into your audio. It's a little bit low. Okay. Commissioner Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for this report, and I think it highlights one of the key items that we face in every rate case, and we have several before us, this issue of leak-prone pipe. And clearly the initiatives over the last, I would say, decade have led to these better metrics. And not only is this helps the safety of people around the state and neighborhoods, but actually reducing methane leakage is an excellent environmental initiative as well. So again, thank you. And again, I think as we go forward, leak-prone pipe and pipeline safety and rate cases will be with us as long as we have gas in the system.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Commissioner Valesky.
Thank you for your presentation and the good work.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. Commissioner Majori.
Yeah, I would also want to thank you for the presentation. Very thorough, very informative, and underscores the value of some of the measures that we've taken to improve the situation of leak-prone pipes and safety. So thank you very much, but I don't have any additional questions.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Valerica. We'll now move on to our second item for discussion today. Item 202, which is the 2022 Utility Customer Service Performance Report, which will be presented to us by Ms. Christine Stafford. Kayla Whitaker is also available for questions. Christine?
How about now? Okay. And could we also please show the PowerPoint presentation again? Thank you. Next slide for 202. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 202 is a staff report that summarizes the New York State electric, natural gas, and water utilities customer service performance for calendar year 2022. While safety and reliability are paramount, the quality of customer service remains vital for utility customers. Customer service performance targets and associated negative revenue adjustments, or NRAs, for certain metrics are negotiated in utility rate cases to help align shareholder and customers' interests by providing potential earnings consequences to shareholders that reflect the quality of service provided to customers. Staff conducted a thorough audit into the utility's reported calendar year 2022 customer service performance, processes, and procedures, which included interrogatory responses, utility site visits, conference calls, and the verification of data submitted. As a result, staff identified and provided 18 recommendations on the report on several areas for improvement and where further standardization could be implemented. Next slide, please. Staff also confirmed that Central Hudson, NYSEG, and RG&E failed to meet the targets for all of their respective metrics in calendar year 2022. Con Edison, Liberty St. Lawrence Gas, and Niagara Mohawk missed one target each, and the remaining utilities met or exceeded the performance standards established within their individual rate plans. Total NRAs incurred in calendar year 2022 equaled $22.6 million. Next, I will explain the service quality metrics, review charts of utility performance for the common service quality metrics, and summarize all of the utilities that incurred NRAs in calendar year 2022. The utilities are required by the Commission to file monthly, quarterly, and annual customer service reports, allowing staff to track customer service performance and identify trends that are to be addressed in rate case proceedings. The reports contain customer service measures, such as call answer rate, which is the percentage of calls answered by a utility representative within 30 seconds, survey-based measures of customer satisfaction, PSC complaint rate, the rate of appointments kept, adjusted bills, which are based on the number of adjusted bills created due to utility error, estimated bills, which measures the number of bills issued from estimated meter readings, and residential collections measures such as customer service terminations, uncollectibles or write-off expense, and customer arrearages. Several utility rate plans contain language that a utility may incur a positive revenue adjustment for its performance in reducing the levels of residential service terminations, uncollectible expense, and/or arrearages each year under the residential collections mechanism. However, the COVID-19 pandemic and the moratorium on service terminations greatly impacted utility collection activity associated with these measures. Therefore, these mechanisms have been paused for the utilities. Next slide, please. The call answer rate, customer satisfaction survey, and PSC complaint rate are typically the metrics used to measure performance at most large utilities. The other metrics are utility-specific and were established to address service quality issues. This slide depicts the large utilities' call answer rate targets and their actual performance. As you can see, Niagara Mohawk, Kedley, Kedney, and Orange and Rockland exceeded their targets in calendar year 2022. Central Hudson, Con Edison, NYSEG, and RG&E fell short of their targets, incurring NRAs. Next slide, please. This slide depicts the major utilities' customer satisfaction survey targets and their actual performance. Con Edison's rate plan requires its customer satisfaction survey to have multiple survey components to measure customer satisfaction, so all four are shown here. As you can see, NYSEG, Niagara Mohawk, Liberty St. Lawrence Gas, RG&E, and Central Hudson failed to meet their survey target and incurred an NRA. The remaining companies met their target for calendar year 2022. Next slide, please. This slide depicts the PSC complaint rate targets for both large and small utilities and their actual performance. Complaint rates are calculated based on a company's number of escalated PSC complaints per 100,000 customers. As you can see, NYSEG, RG&E, and Central Hudson failed this metric and incurred an NRA, and the remaining companies met their target for calendar year 2022. Corning's complaint target uses actual complaints rather than a complaint rate based on its customer population, so it is not included on this chart. Corning had 0 escalated complaints in 2022. Next slide, please. This slide summarizes all of the utilities that incurred NRAs in calendar year 2022. Central Hudson failed its call answer rate, customer satisfaction survey, and PSC complaint rate, which resulted in a combined NRA of 23 basis points, or approximately $2.9 million. Central Hudson attributed these failures to issues with its customer billing system conversion, increased media attention that drove up customer call volumes and complaints, and a high level of attrition in its call center. The department has an ongoing investigation into Central Hudson's billing issues that occurred in 2021 and 2022. Con Edison failed to meet its call answer rate target and will incur an NRA of $4 million. Con Edison attributed its performance to decreased staffing levels. Liberty St. Lawrence Gas failed to meet its customer satisfaction survey target and will be assessed an NRA of $36,000. Liberty stated it experienced low customer response rates through its survey vendor and has since changed its vendor and anticipates increased performance in 2023. Niagara Mohawk failed to meet its customer satisfaction survey target, resulting in an NRA of 2 basis points or approximately $1.1 million. Niagara Mohawk attributed this to high bills due to commodity prices and has conducted an educational campaign to inform customers of high commodity costs. NYSEG and RG&E both did not meet their call answer rate, customer satisfaction survey, percent of estimated bills, and PSC complaint rate targets, incurring NRAs of $8.7 million and $5.9 million, respectively. NYSEG and RG&E stated that staffing issues were the root cause of their failures on these metrics. Both NYSEG and RG&E stated expanded telecommuting opportunities are expected to improve hiring and employee retention in their call center in 2023, thus improving their customer service performance. The customer service performance indicators currently in place at the utilities in New York State establish standards for performance and put significant amounts of shareholder earnings at risk for non-performance. These mechanisms implemented by the Commission, coupled with staff's ongoing monitoring and auditing efforts, appear to have been effective in encouraging some of the companies to make customer service a priority. However, other utilities experienced significant challenges in 2022. Staff continues to focus its efforts on reviewing service quality metrics for the companies that have missed their targets in 2022 to ensure these metrics and incentives will be improved upon in 2023. Through the rate case process, staff will continue to advocate for stronger performance-based rate-making strategies relating to customer service as alternatives to traditional cost of service regulation. Staff will also continue to monitor utility customer service quality to ensure the fair and appropriate treatment of utility customers across the state. Next slide, please. This completes my presentation on the Customer Service Performance Report for calendar year 2022. Staff is available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, and great inaugural run presenting to the Commission. We've been doing this since the early 90s, if I remember correctly, and part of this is an understanding that the utilities have a very unique role to play in the communities they serve, and that ensuring quality customer service is a key component of that role. And so having these metrics in place, monitoring these activities, helps us make sure that the utilities are doing what they need to do to take care of the customers they have. I have two short questions for you. I'll be very brief. You mentioned a total $22.6 million in negative revenue adjustments. Am I clear in understanding that these negative revenue adjustments ultimately help ratepayers by lowering costs?
Yes, they're worked into the rates.
So typically the NRAs are deferred for ratepayer benefits, correct?
Cool. Thank you. Just wanted to confirm that. And one other term you used, you talked about an escalated complaint. Could you amplify what an escalated complaint is?
Yes, the complaints come into the quick response system through our call center, and if the customer is not satisfied with that, with the response from that, it's then escalated to an SRS. Our call center contacts the utility. The utility has a certain amount of time to respond, and either if the response is not received soon enough within the time frame, or if the response isn't satisfactory, doesn't satisfy the customer, then it's escalated to a higher level complaint, and those are the ones that are counted.
Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. Commissioner Berman, any question?
Thank you. I guess my focus is, first, I appreciate having the opportunity to look at this every year and see where we are. I also deeply appreciate you personally in the ongoing dialogue internally, that you're always available and staff is always available to kind of look over things and explain things, and sort of the ongoing challenges we have in looking at these metrics and how to help improve things and lead to a path forward. I will sort of flag, as the chair did, a comment on the negative revenue adjustments, and kind of looking at what that is across the board in terms of negative revenue adjustments and positive revenue adjustments, and how is it balancing out. But also, sort of trying to take a little stock of analysis in terms of these adjustments and these metrics shouldn't be static, and should be trying to help forecast where there may need to be some changes perhaps, or new focus, especially as it relates to back on, the rate cases and the deferral of some of this. I want to make sure that the trend is one that isn't just seeing us going down. I think for me, what struck me was that I think it was 2019 where we had, I think at least 4 utilities that didn't meet their negative revenue adjustments. At that time, there was a focus on the reason for that was that, for a variety of reasons, but our main focus was that extreme weather in 2018 caused a spike in outages, which ultimately led to a decline in interruption frequency and duration performance for electric service for the year. And there was also a focus on kind of zoning in on some of those utilities who had challenges during different storms. And that led to really some positive developments in terms of a new focus on emergency response plans. But I think it's also, for me, needing to look a little bit more holistically and perhaps kind of zone in on is what we're doing ultimately helpful, and not just about trying to make sure that we don't miss the target again. So for those 4, that they don't miss the target again, but that we are also reacting in a prudent way in terms of our responsibility to the ratepayers. For a lot of this, I think in 2019, the solution kind of going forward at that time was to increase staff, increase folks out during an emergency response. But that also has an impact on the costs, and also on the challenges when you're having a hard time staffing up, but also the challenges of kind of where the priority is. So I look at this as an opportunity as we go forward. The takeaway here shouldn't just be preparing to help in reducing or ensuring that everyone's meeting their target, but what are we doing holistically that we can make sure it is really all of us rowing the same way in the path forward. And that may mean kind of more flexibility, and also an understanding of what that impact is. We have other legislation coming in terms of climate change that we are addressing in the emergency response plans, et cetera. We have some cybersecurity stuff, and all of this will have to be factored into how do our metrics ensure that we are not remaining static, but that we're actually helping to be responsible, and perhaps where that looks. So I just raise that because I think it's a significant thing that we can do from a policy perspective and as regulators in ensuring that we are really having a good role in oversight and direction and keeping in mind our mission of safe and reliable service and ensuring that it's done cost effectively. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Alisi?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for the report. We couldn't possibly do what's expected of us without this kind of information, which is the result of a lot of hard work and talent. This will help us as a commission. It'll help the department. Certainly will help the utilities. And at the end of the day, we hope that it will help the consumers. And all of us in those different categories are impacted by the effort of providing services. And that effort will result in good things, I hope, with the kind of information that you've provided for us here. Thank you very much.
All right. Commissioner Edwards?
Yes, thank you. I would just have a request that in a 6-month time, we could just do a review on those companies that did have a negative revenue adjustment, just to see how they are doing in terms of their progress.
Yes, definitely. I'll take that back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Edwards. We'll loop you in on those discussions as they evolve. All right. Commissioner Howard?
Thank you. One thing that jumps out at me at this report, so much of this, what we call customer service, is about people. And if utilities do not have adequate staff to meet their mission, it's a problematic thing. I know everybody had a hard time during COVID, a variety of things, but again, it's a real shortcoming, I believe, of several utilities that those have had negative revenue adjustments. You got to do a better job at recruiting and retaining workforce during difficult times. That's not going to go away. And a big part of every one of our rate cases is wages and bennies for individuals who work at utilities. If they need to match the current job market in a given locale, I think that might be a good idea. But it's unacceptable not to have the level of staffing needed to meet these requirements. And hopefully, when we see our 6-month report, we'll see more head count at these utilities that will get the work done. But thank you. It was very informative, and especially it will guide us in our decision making in rate cases going forward.
Commissioner Valesky?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Christy, for your presentation and for the information. I just have one request. I noticed a number of your metrics were not met by Central Hudson, and you also reminded us that the department has an ongoing investigation into Central Hudson's billing practices. I would be interested in not for today, but if you could take back a status update of where that billing investigation stands. I believe it's something that we initiated about 6 months ago now, so it's certainly timely that we would have an update.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Majori?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I think a lot of the report speaks for itself, and it's also reflective of sentiment that I often hear when I'm sitting in on public statement hearings where customer service related issues are really at the forefront of the mind of a lot of the customers. In my, to be provocatively oversimplified, it strikes me that the task of keeping the lights on should be more challenging than answering the phone. But, it's not necessarily the case in all of these examples. This is not an action item. As Commissioner Howard said, there are action items such as rate cases that will come up before us where this information, I think, is going to be extremely helpful and useful in guiding our decision-making. Finally, I just want to acknowledge that, some of the issues that are captured on an individual level by these numbers that are aggregations are extremely distressing and emotional for people who are struggling on their end of the phone. And I think that getting this information from you is part of the process that we engage in to improve the situation. So thank you for a very thorough report, very clearly articulated, and I'm looking forward to opportunities to use this information to improve the situation in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. Thank you, Christy. We'll now move to the third item for discussion today. This is case 23E0119, which is the 2022 Electric Reliability Performance Report. It'll be presented today by Patrick Blake. Kevin Wisely is also available for questions. Patrick, please begin.
Could we please display the PowerPoint again? Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Christian, Commissioners. My name is Patrick Blake, and I'm an assistant engineer in the Office of Resilience and Emergency Preparedness. Today, I will be providing you with a brief statewide summary of New York's electric reliability performance for 2022. Staff's written report provides additional information and individual reviews for each of the major electric utilities. Next slide, please. Each year, staff performs an analysis of electric reliability performance based on monthly interruption data submitted by the electric utilities. Staff uses this data to calculate the frequency and duration of interruptions and identify trends. Frequency is affected by factors such as system design, capital investment, maintenance practices, and weather. Decisions made by utilities today can take several years before fully being reflected in frequency performance. Duration is affected by workforce levels, workforce management, and geography. Policy changes can have more immediate effects on duration performance. By reviewing the data with and without major storms, we can achieve a balance between interruptions under the utility's control, such as equipment failures, and those where the utility may need to implement resiliency measures to prevent interruptions. It should be noted that some of the statistics presented today reflect 34 major storm events that occurred last year. Reliability performance mechanisms, or RPMs, include company-wide targets for frequency and duration. RPM targets are established in each rate case, and the investor-owned electric utilities are subject to negative revenue adjustments to failing to meet RPM targets. Central Hudson, Con Edison, Orange and Rockland, National Grid, and RG&E met all of their reliability targets in 2022. NYSEG failed its target for frequency for the fourth consecutive year, incurring a negative revenue adjustment of $7 million. Trees continue to be the largest contributor to interruptions for NYSEG. As part of the 2020 rate order, the Commission established an expanded distribution vegetation management budget for the company to fund 2 additional trimming programs. The first program reclaims circuits that have not been trimmed in over 10 years, and the second program proactively addresses danger trees outside of the distribution right-of-way. Although NYSEG has seen a decrease in the number of outages due to trees inside the distribution right-of-way over the last 3 years, there has been an increase in the number of outages due to trees from outside the right-of-way during that same period. NYSEG should better develop their approach to identify and remove hazard trees from outside the right-of-way. In order to address this issue, the Director of the Office of Resilience and Emergency Preparedness will request by letter that NYSEG provide a report detailing proposed improvements and revisions to their approach by August 31st, 2023. Additionally, in order to address an increase in the number of prearranged outages that both NYSEG and RG&E experienced in 2022, staff recommends both companies meet with the other New York State utilities to discuss best practices regarding coordinating planned outages to conduct make-ready work. Next slide, please. This graph shows the frequency performance for the last 5 years statewide. Since Con Edison's networks are usually less prone to interruptions than overhead systems, and Con Edison serves a large percentage of the state's electric customers, Con Edison's data can skew the overall statistics. As a result, we review the data both with and without Con Edison. Excluding major storms, the statewide interruption frequency for 2022 improved when compared to both last year and the 5-year average, when viewed both with and without Con Edison. On average, customers experienced one interruption approximately every 19 months. For utilities other than Con Edison, customers, on average, experienced one interruption every 11.5 months. The major causes for interruptions, excluding major storms, were equipment failures and tree contacts. To reduce the frequency of interruptions, the utilities invest in capital projects, inspections, and maintenance activities. Next slide, please. This graph shows duration performance for the last 5 years on a statewide basis, excluding major storms, and again showing performance both with and without Con Edison. The statewide duration was 1 hour and 54 minutes. This is approximately 5.4 minutes shorter than 2021 and 4.8 minutes shorter than the statewide 5-year average. The statewide duration for utilities other than Con Edison was 1 hour and 50 minutes in 2022, which is 3 minutes shorter than 2021 and approximately 2.4 minutes shorter than the 5-year average. Next slide, please. The state experienced 34 separate major storm events in 2022. Although this is 4 less events than 2021, major storms in 2022 caused approximately 31% more customer interruptions and nearly double the customer hours of interruption when compared to 2021. As can be seen in the graph, the effect of major storms on customers in 2022 was more than those experienced in 2021, but still less than 2020, which had several notable major storm events, including Tropical Storm Isaias. The large increase in customer hours can be attributed to 3 separate winter storm events that occurred in February, April, and December of 2022. Combined, these 3 storms were responsible for approximately 70% of the major storm customer hours of interruption in 2022. The largest storm in 2022 occurred in April and severely impacted parts of the capital, central New York, Mohawk Valley, North Country, and Southern Tier regions. Large portions of National Grid and NYSEG service territories were affected, with both companies sustaining over 200,000 customer outages. The second largest storm occurred over the Christmas holiday weekend as a historic blizzard and lake effect snowstorm impacted large portions of western New York and the Finger Lakes region. This event spanned nearly 5 days, with the greatest impact in the city of Buffalo, affecting both National Grid's Frontier and NYSEG's Lancaster operating divisions. In total, approximately 110,000 customers lost service. The third largest storm occurred during the first week of February, when a winter storm tracked through the Southern Tier and into the Mid-Hudson and Mohawk Valley regions. The storm had the greatest impact in Central Hudson's Kingston operating division, with approximately 79,000 customers interrupted. Next slide, please. Thank you. That concludes my presentation. we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Patrick, and great job on your first time out. Good job. I appreciate the information you provided, and I want to really highlight my appreciation for what I find is a continuously improving and comprehensive report, looking at what's going on. I really very much appreciated how you were able to highlight the specific impacts of storms on an annual basis, because what that's showing to me is just how significant an individual storm can be on the performance in that particular area. And what's a little troubling is, we are aware that these storms are going to become more frequent, more impactful, and we're seeing that actually in your report right now. And a thought that occurred to me as you were presenting is, how do we take that into account going forward? Would we need to adjust our metrics or think about developing new metrics to look at these individual storms in isolation and the performance there? So question we'll be discussing offline, but very much appreciate your time and presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Berman?
Thank you. I did appreciate your presentation. I just wanted to kind of note two things. One, two of the new takeaways that are being added is that NYSEG is going to provide a report to our Director of the Office of Resilience and Emergency Preparedness detailing proposed improvements and revision to their tree issues outside the right-of-way. And that's something that I think would benefit all of us being updated on. And then the second, and I'll get to my but, and the second thing that's being added is to address an increase in the number of prearranged outages that both NYSEG and RG&E experienced in 2022. Staff is going to be recommending that the companies meet with other New York State utilities to discuss that coordinated planned outages for make-ready work. So I just want to point out and just kind of make sure that I have this right. That while that's new, the utilities are encouraged to get together and do best practices on all things, right? This is just sort of targeting for us those things that, sort of stand out, but that it is a continuous and should be a continuous collaborative process. But it doesn't mean that because one utility does it one way that everybody else should follow, but perhaps understand what may or may not work. But each utility territory is perhaps very different and has unique circumstances. So it's a way to sort of make sure that people are working together. I do think it's also important that commissioners are timely updated on the ongoing dialogue and the challenges that are out there, because it does impact other areas of our regulatory work, and it is important for us to have a handle on that. So thank you.
Commissioner Elisi?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would simply say that this information is made even more valuable by your presentation. Thank you.
Commissioner Edwards?
No comments. Thank you very much for the information.
Commissioner Howard?
Thank you. Just like on our last presentation, much of these problems are related to people, particularly on the tree trimming. It is unfortunate that it has gotten to this level of, to this level of lack of maintenance. It's just that simple. You can kick the can so long, it's going to catch up with you. It has caught up with us. I think that combined with, and as we have seen, and I spoke to Kevin many times about this, these new, not the major storms, but the pretty big storms, particularly those that go across the state routinely most summers lately. And the outages are almost nearly exclusively from vegetation on lines. There's only one way to fix that. That combined, and then I think it's important that customers understand, who I believe, now have zero tolerance for outages. There was a period of time, maybe, that was true, and as we electrify our system, that tolerance becomes even less. So again, these will be issues in upcoming rate cases before us currently. But this issue, it's not going away. It's not going to get cheaper per se. And along with the tree trimming is lack of investment. You can trim all the trees, but if you have crummy infrastructure, that doesn't help either. So these playing catch up at the same time that we're doing these major expansions is really going to be a tough and expensive undertaking to get to a level of performance that I think that the commission and the general public is comfortable with. But again, thank you for your presentation. Again, diligence on this is what it's all about. And again, and we will see, as we have seen marginal improvements to date, but we will see at the end of several cases that we're doing if that marginal improvement moves to significant improvement. But again, thank you for the presentation.
Commissioner Valesky.
Thank you, Patrick, for the presentation. Kevin, thank you and your entire team for the work that you do. It's a good time also to acknowledge, once again, I know we have done this in the past, but the regular emails that we each receive during storms in regard to electric outages, sometimes on an hourly basis, not only based on utilities, but I find the county by county breakdown particularly helpful as well. So thanks for those, and hopefully we won't have many this year, because that would mean we don't have many major storms. Thank you.
Commissioner Majori.
Thank you. Much as with the last item, this is not an action item. So there are, the information that you presented to us will absolutely be relevant in upcoming items. Commissioner Howard mentioned rate cases and perhaps other items to address some of these issues. I have questions and comments regarding utilities' responses to particular storms, but I don't think this is the moment to raise those issues. But I will be using this information that you presented in upcoming matters where it is more appropriate. So thank you very much. I think this is very informative and helpful, and your presentation was very clear. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you again, Patrick. Okay. We'll now move on to our fourth discussion item for today. Item 302, case 23-E-0110, which is the 2022 Electric Safety Standards Performance Report. It'll be presented to us today by Philippos Philip. Jason Posse is also available for questions. Philippos, please begin.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair, and good morning, Commissioners. Slide, please.
Could we please display the PowerPoint presentation? Thank you.
Today, I'll be providing an overview of the electric safety standards and the utilities compliance for 2022. This is for information only. Next slide, please. I will start with some background information on the electric safety standards. The original safety standards were adopted by the Commission in January 2005. The standards included stray voltage testing and visual inspection of electric facilities on an annual basis, and the adoption of the National Electrical Safety Code, NESC, as the minimum standard for utility construction, maintenance, and operation. The overall goal of the safety standards is to safeguard the public from exposure to stray voltage and to identify and mitigate any potentially harmful condition before safety hazards and/or reliability deficiencies develop. 2022 marked the 18th year for the electric safety standards, or the third year of the fourth 5-year cycle. Next slide, please. The utilities are required to test their underground system and street-lit facilities on an annual basis, while manual testing their overhead distribution and transmission facilities on a 5-year cycle. With regards to testing, inspectors carry a pen-like device that lights up red when voltage is detected. 4.5 volt is the calibrated threshold of the device, as that is the voltage limit where the potential for injury becomes concerning. However, the device does signal for lower voltages. Once voltage is detected, the facility is then tested with a digital voltmeter to record actual recordings. All voltage findings of 1 volt or more are required to be recorded and mitigated. In total, there were only 133 voltage findings for manual stray voltage testing of 1 volt or more, or approximately 0.01% of the roughly 1 million facilities tested in 2022. This graph shows the historical findings for manual stray voltage testing going back 5 years. The blue section shows the findings between 1 and 4.4 volts, and the red sections shows the findings that are 4.5 volts and greater. The 2022 total number of stray voltage test findings saw a significant decrease at the 1 to 4.4 volt level and the 4.5 volts and greater level. This is mainly attributed to a reduction in findings on streetlights from Con Edison. Streetlights continue to be the largest facilities grouping with the stray voltage findings. For example, in 2022, out of 133 findings, streetlights accounted for 99 of those findings. As part of the electric safety standards, utilities are required to test all publicly accessible streetlights, regardless of ownership. If an issue is found with a streetlight that the utility does not own, that utility is required to make the condition safe. It is ultimately the responsibility of the municipality that owns the streetlight to make the necessary repairs. Next slide, please. For mobile stray voltage testing, per commission order, 12 mobile surveys are required in New York City, 2 in Buffalo, 1 each in Yonkers, White Plains, New Rochelle, Albany, Niagara Falls, and Rochester every year. The upstate locations were selected due to their population density of 50,000 plus. Again, any voltage findings of 1 volt or more is reported and mitigated. In 2022, there were 8,405 voltage findings in the 3 utility service territories where mobile stray voltage testing is required, which is up from 6,200 findings in 2021. This graph presents the total number of stray voltage findings across the state using the mobile testing units for the last 5 years. Blue represents Con Edison, red represents National Grid, and the green represents Rochester Gas and Electric. The increase in Con Edison findings primarily consisted of low voltage findings, with a majority of the increase being seen in the streetlight, traffic signals, and non-utility facilities categories. Based on recent years' results and discussions with Con Edison, the increase in findings can be attributed to the continued use of road salt during winter weather conditions, which inherently causes corrosion and breakdown of the cable insulation in underground facilities. The increase in National Grid findings were a result of the mobile testing performed in Buffalo, which were also primarily low voltage findings and almost all associated with the streetlights. Staff has held meetings with the National Grid to determine the specific causes of the increase and requested the company devise a plan to reduce these events in the future. Next slide, please. Per the electric safety standards, the utilities are required to complete visual inspections on 20% of their facilities each year, so that 100% of a utility's transmission and distribution facilities will be inspected at least once every 5 years. 2022 was the 3rd year of the 4th full cycle of the inspection program. All utilities have completed approximately 60% inspection of assets in compliance with the standards. For inspections, 2022 saw the downward trend continue in overall deficiency found by the electric utilities, with a total of approximately 59,000 deficiencies found. That is a 21% reduction compared to the approximately 75,000 found in 2021. Next slide, please. For PSEC Long Island, they are not subject to the Commission's safety standards, as they and system owner LIPA are not regulated by the Commission. Through discussion with the DPS staff to have PSEC Long Island move towards full compliance with the Commission's safety standards, PSEC Long Island began a facility inspection and stray voltage testing pilot program in 2020 and has continued to test and inspect approximately 10% of its system assets on an annual basis. In total, PSEC Long Island tested and inspected approximately 40,000 facilities in 2022 and found a total of 2 stray voltage cases, which is 0.005% of facilities tested, and 1,992 inspection deficiencies, which is 5.2% of those inspected. Of those 1992 deficiencies found, 30 were level 1, 65 level 2, and 1,897 level 3. The increase in level 3 deficiency is because of numerous vandalism findings, such as cut down ground in the town of Babylon. This graph presents the total number of stray water findings and inspection deficiencies found across PSEC Long Island area for the last 3 years. The blue shadow represents 2020, red represents 2021, and the green represents 2022. The company will continue the pilot program in 2023 to test and inspect an additional 10% of facilities, targeting areas where the highest rate of deficiencies is expected. Last, we are happy to report that, based on the continued discussions with the DPS staff has had with the company, and as required by the 2023 PSEC Long Island Performance Metrics, which is TND 44, regulatory compliance, PSEC Long Island has now submitted an implementation plan to the staff on March 31st, 2023, to move to full compliance with the Commission's Electric Safety Standard Program requirements beginning in 2024. Next slide, please. In summary, the New York utilities have met and complied with the requirements of the Commission's Electric Safety Standards for 2022. This completes my presentation. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioners. And we are ready to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Philippos. I appreciate the presentation. Very clear and concise. I have one question regarding the Long Island pilot with PSEG. You mentioned level 1, level 2, and level 3. Can you speak to the differences between those levels? And
Level 1s are the major ones which requires repairs within 7 days, and level 2 within 1 year, and level 3 within 3 years.
Got it. Okay. And in terms of the increase in level 3, can you speak to what the cause of that was from year to year?
Vandalism.
Yeah, so when we looked into it and asked those questions, I guess it was mainly attributed to vandalism of the streetlight bases in the town of Babylon.
Got it. Okay. That was the main driver. Okay. Thank you for that. So again, appreciate the review. This is an important part of keeping the system safe and reliable. So definitely look forward to these every year, and looking forward to finishing up this next this 5-year cycle and preparing for the next one. So thank you, Philippos. Commissioner Byrne.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I just want to note that I also appreciate very much the inclusion of PSEG Long Island here. I know that not in all the presentations was PSEG Long Island included, and I think it does help to include them even if we don't have direct oversight. I think the overall goal of looking at how everyone is doing is helpful, especially because they should be and they are working with other utilities and staff, and I find it concerning that they're left out in this annual update. But so I pointed out here. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Commissioner Alisi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So today we're harvesting a tremendous amount of important information that gives us guidance. It's very valuable, and this is yet another part of the contribution toward that end. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Commissioner Edwards.
No, thank you very much. Good information, and we just have to keep watching on it. So thank you.
Commissioner Howard.
Thank you, and thank you for the mention that as particularly streetlights are the predominant issue where stray voltage occurs.
Yes.
In and around streetlights. That being said, I'm glad you pointed out that as the streetlight, the actual structures go on to the municipal-owned infrastructure, that maintenance schedules and performance goes to that municipality as well. And I think as we see more and more of this migration, I think it'll be incumbent upon us and the utilities to make sure that testing is robust enough, because like many things, streetlight maintenance could fall the way of budget cuts in local budgets and things like that. And we could get back to a situation we were several decades ago where these occurrences were actually much more frequent and largely were untested. But again, that vigilance, I think, will be very important and something that municipalities must, in their due diligence, consider when they do purchase these facilities. But thank you for the information.
Commissioner Valesky,
Thank you for your presentation. I have no questions.
Commissioner Majori,
Thank you. I also have no questions, but I appreciate the presentation and the information.
Thank you.
all right. Thank you, commissioners. Thank you, Philippos. All right. At this time, we're going to take a short 15-minute break, and we'll reconvene. So my clock says 11:40, so we'll rejoin ourselves here at 11:55. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back from the break. We'll now move to our fifth item for discussion today. Item 303, case 22-E-0633, which addresses the public policy requirements for transmission planning purposes. It'll be presented today by Ms. Elizabeth Grassaru. Leica Jonal and David Drexler are available for questions. Please begin, Liz.
Great. Good morning for a couple more minutes, Chairman and Commissioners. Very happy to see you all again. This item before you responds to one of the key recommendations made in the 2021 Power Grid study and completes the blueprint for the transmission infrastructure needed to serve the state's statutory goal for offshore wind. As you know, the CLCPA set a specific mandate for 9 gigawatts of offshore wind resources to be constructed by 2035. The 2021 Power Grid study concluded that with careful planning, the 9 gigawatt target could be met, allocating 3 gigawatts to Long Island interconnection points and another 6 gigawatts to New York City. Thus, the study recommended development of a new transmission tie between Long Island and the mainland with at least 3 gigawatts of capacity. The Commission acted on this recommendation in March of 2021 by referring that transmission need to the NYISO for the solicitation of proposals under the NYISO's Public Policy Planning Tariff. Just this past week, the NYISO board selected one of the projects submitted in response to that solicitation as the most cost-effective option for the state's ratepayers. The order before you today would again leverage the NYISO's public policy planning process to solicit transmission proposals that will support the integration of additional offshore wind with the New York City local transmission system owned and managed by Con Edison. To meet the state goal, the transmission need identified in this order is sized for at least 4.7 gigawatts of capacity. This approach takes into account the contracted offshore wind generation projects, which account for about 4.3 gigawatts of the 9 gigawatt goal, leaving a balance of 4.7 gigawatts needed for future offshore sources and rounding out the 6 gigawatt recommended in the Power Grid study for New York City interconnections. The order further specifies that transmission proposals must be complete designs that incorporate both onshore and offshore equipment, including converter stations, interconnection facilities, and local transmission upgrades. This infrastructure would carry energy from future offshore wind projects from a collection point in the ocean to points of interconnection on the Con Edison system, thus substantially reducing wind developers' interconnection risk. Staff believe this approach will ultimately result in lower bids in future NYSERDA offshore wind procurements and lower OREC prices overall. As provided in the NYISO tariff, the order includes additional criteria and metrics for the NYISO to use in evaluating any transmission proposals. First, the order builds on the extensive work done by NYSERDA, staff, and a number of our sister state agencies in the recent cable routing assessment, which analyzed the many constraints that will impact construction of any underwater cabling in New York Harbor. The order provides that staff should continue to work with those entities, as well as with federal agencies with siting jurisdiction in this area, to provide the NYISO and proposers with feedback on the permittability of their designs. The aim of this effort is to ensure those proposals that are presented to the NYISO board have a reasonable likelihood of meeting relevant permit standards and requirements. Second, the order requires proposers to update the information they provide to the NYISO on their efforts to secure real estate rights, as this issue is particularly challenging for infrastructure projects in New York City. Again, staff is recommending this approach to ensure the selected project is well positioned to progress promptly to permitting and construction. Third, the order calls on Con Edison to work with staff and engage a process to make information about potential points of interconnection available to transmission developers considering making submissions in response to this order and the NISO solicitation. This step has the potential to improve the quality of bids and will help manage the costs to ratepayers of the offshore wind program. Given that the CLCPA deadline for the 9 gigawatts is 2035, the order sets an in-service date of January 1, 2033 for the transmission solutions. Developers would be required to show that their projects can be permitted and constructed by that date. If the Commission approves this order, NISO will commence its process under the public policy tariff and establish a schedule for submissions and evaluations, just as was done in the case of the Long Island Tie solicitation. And I and my colleagues are happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Liz. I appreciate the presentation. This is the culmination of what has been years of work getting to this point. And I like that you pointed out the most recent decision from the New York ISO concerning what's happening in Long Island, as that's really helpful in framing how this particular action comes into play. I just have a technical question for you about the connection points in particular. So you mentioned that they're going to be going for connection points in the ocean for future interconnection into the Con Ed system. Could you talk to that a little bit and how that's an improvement or more efficient process over what currently plays out today?
Yes, sure. What we've had to date with the contracted projects are radial interconnections. That is, each wind farm, each wind project is proposing its own transmission connection to the mainland. This project would be one piece of transmission infrastructure with a point in the ocean to which the wind farms would connect, and the cable infrastructure would bring the energy of all of those wind farms to specific interconnection points, in this case in New York City. And this would be more efficient and would also likely minimizes the environmental impact that we would otherwise see if we continued down the path of having radial interconnections for each wind project.
Great. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. No further questions. Thank you for the presentation today. Commissioner Berman?
Thank you. I appreciate the presentation, but I also appreciate the hard work that's gotten us to this point. We have a significant role in system grid planning that includes a focus on reliability, affordability, and safety. And in particular, we have a significant role in transmission planning. And that means that we have to also work with others like the ISO, the Reliability Council, and then the relevant stakeholders to ensure that we are moving forward in a positive way and also being focused on ensuring the reliability of the grid and what that means. This draft order really is an attempt to ensure a thoughtful, sort of prudent process in how to look at planning for the transmission that we're going to need to safely and reliably integrate, in this case, offshore wind into New York City. And the draft order also is focused on what that looks like in helping to reduce risks to interconnection and to support better project development. I think that here, the draft order also is trying to thread the needle of sort of a better process on emphasizing sort of more system planning, more coordination. This draft order specifically talks about alignment with the ISO, making sure that we aren't sort of at cross purposes, but that we are helpful in looking at the challenges, addressing them from the get-go, and trying to do some of this planning that's really necessary, where before it was done sort of, during or after. This is, the next phase, and there are going to be many other steps along the way, not just with this, but just across the board. So for me, I want us to also have a takeaway of not just sort of patting ourselves on the back in terms of, you're great, here we are, we got this. There's a lot of things that have to be done across the board, and making sure that we're not focused on trying to get to the result that we want, but rather more holistically ensure that we are looking carefully at all of the different things that are needed, and being thoughtful in understanding some of the implications, positive and negative, and trying to figure out ways to address them before a crisis, and also in a way that helps us with those challenges. There are going to be many. I also am very cognizant of the fact that one of the challenges that we have is future, not only in current legislation, but future legislation that sometimes, while well-meaning, can be a little overly prescriptive and reactive, and doesn't necessarily give us the proper flexibility or give us the proper sort of understanding of our role in ensuring that it's done, the system planning is done thoughtfully and with the focus of reliability and cost containment. And so with that, I think that folks should feel comfortable in seeing that we are trying to set a clear path from system planning perspective, and needing to ensure that they give us the necessary prudent flexibility and the flexibility, frankly, to the ISO and to Reliability Council and others to help as the experts in looking at all of these different things and the challenges that may be there. So thank you for that.
Commissioner Alisi.
Thank you, Chair. Just building on what we learned last week during the briefing, this is very good, but I have no questions for you. I just want to let you know we appreciate your work.
Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Commissioner Edwards.
No, thank you very much for your thoroughness.
Commissioner Howard.
Thank you. I want to add my praise to my colleagues, to the hard work that staff has done. And for those that don't know it, New York is really the envy of the nation when it comes to transmission planning and now implementation and steel in the ground, and something we can be justly proud of. We're also lucky. We have a single state independent system operator, which has, over the years, despite differences on policy and things, we have established a very, I think, healthy and cooperative relationship in terms of fulfilling these public policy needs. I believe this will be our fourth PPTM, again, which other states have not done any. So again, I think it is a process that we now know works in terms of the planning. One of the things that does concern me, and I thank you in this order, that we limit it to the offshore space. There were a lot of people that wanted us to have all over the state PPTNs. We'll get there, but we're doing this one at a time. And I think this is the proof will be in how we evaluate the current one that was just voted on by the ISO. It appears in this period of hyperinflation, pardon the expression hyper, but certainly supply chain inflation that we have not seen in a very, very long time, particularly in the electric equipment, labor and space, that there's a temptation by doing these projects like this to, and if we're not careful, it would encourage developers to lowball their bids potentially, particularly if they know later on they can come back and say, well, we're well-intentioned, but we need more money. Again, so I think some of the languages where I do appreciate, particularly dealing with being realistic on costs, developing the hard work. This is real estate development in New York City. Fortunes have been made and lost on this particular endeavor. Additionally, these are going to be potentially very disruptive depending on how they're done and how they're engineered to any given community. So again, I do appreciate adding the language about outreach to every level of stakeholder. I think that we will see, and we're seeing in some other locales, failure to do that outreach adequately and on a timely basis can catch up with you. A lot of lessons are going to be learned right next door in Nassau County to build to move the current proposal to reality. I think this will be equally as challenging. The question I have, and I asked you this before, is that there is much talk, and certainly there are bills before the legislature, to increase our legislative mandate on offshore wind procurement to significantly above where we're at. Will any of this during this period sort of reflect, well, we can get to this, but the next jump, will this forestall more difficult decisions later? I mean, you see where I'm coming from, I hope.
So Liz is going to answer the policy question. I just wanted to kind of restate what the law is right now. So the CLCPA says at least is the mandate, right? At least 9 gigawatts. So with that said, I'll let Liz answer the policy question.
That's a really difficult question. If we put on a different pair of eyeglasses, if we wear different eyeglasses, are we going to, look back and see things differently? And I suppose that's possible. What we are trying to do here is, one, support the statutory goal that is before us today, make sure that we can do that. Make sure we know that the transmission corridors into New York City talk about precious real estate. Those are very highly constrained. We're trying to make the best use we can of those, given what we know today. And I think if the legislature or this commission, adopts a new target for offshore wind, we will have to engage a planning process, a forward-looking planning process, and look at options. We're trying hard not to. With this proposal, we're trying hard not to close doors, but given the constraints of the New York Harbor environment, it is almost impossible not to close at least one. So that's probably not the most comforting answer, but I think what we've achieved here is to show that some forward-looking planning can achieve some efficiencies, and that we should be attentive to that in thinking about future goals. We should be attentive to the transmission planning needs in a forward-thinking way.
And describe the level. It seems that particularly the level of cooperation will be necessary from developers to all sort of agree. We're all going to meet at Spot in the Ocean, and we're all going to go down into the harbor and to interconnect. That's sort of unprecedented. That level of coordination between owners on new construction.
I'm not sure how much actual coordination the developers would have to enter into among developers. They will be offered the opportunity to interconnect to this facility. It will, I think, it will present significant economic advantages for them, and that will probably motivate them to look at it and take it seriously. Each of them will have to get to the interconnection point in the water on its own, but we're going to size this in such a way that everybody, up to the 4.7, that everybody can get interconnected. So they shouldn't need to coordinate with each other, except to the extent that they may be using the same cabling vessels, to get their connection cables to this interconnection point. But I think it's going to be a big motivator just because of the economic and risk reduction factors.
Thank you. And while my views on how these projects are financed statewide are I don't need to go through them again. Again, this would be another statewide financed project, correct?
That is the default mode under the NISO public policy tariff. Yes.
The NYSERDA process is also statewide.
No,
so
I
that it's
understand
just
that.
substituting what we believe is going to be a less expensive one for the current one.
Correct.
And the NISO tariff includes cost containment measures.
Great, thank you. This is, again, the hard, as hard as we've got to hear, the real hard stuff is going to come before us.
Commissioner Valesky.
Well, on that note, Liz, thank you for the work. Thank you for the presentation. I do just have a few questions. There's a lot going on with offshore wind. So some of these may relate to the order before us. Some of them may not. So if you would just indulge me. First, I want to thank you for addressing. I would have asked you about the action that the NISO took earlier this week. I appreciate you including that in your presentation, and that certainly clarifies it. So thank you for that. In terms of clarification, I just took Chair Christian's question earlier. The interconnection point in the ocean, will that only apply to new wind projects going forward, or do previous projects that have already been approved now have the opportunity or ability through this order, should it be approved, to connect in the ocean as well?
I have a little bit of a hierarchy of a response. Future projects in NISO, I get my acronyms mixed up. NYSERDA has an ongoing offshore wind solicitation today, New York 3, and they plan to conduct another one, New York 4, in the near future. I would expect New York 4 bidders would likely be directed to interconnect with this facility. New York 3 bidders have the option to connect, assuming that it's cheaper than each of them going radially. So that's a little bit of a hierarchy, and it doesn't directly offer anything to any of the contracted parties. They've already made their plans, as I said, to do radial interconnections to the mainland.
Thank you. Recently, we approved an order in regard to Con Ed's Clean Energy Hub that at one point, an initial version, I believe, had primarily to do with offshore wind. What we approved had to do with reliability, but allowed for future action around offshore wind. So I'm curious, does the action we're about to take today impact in any way, shape, or form the Clean Energy Hub that we've already approved for Con Ed?
You might have heard me mention that, or you perhaps saw in the draft order that we are expecting to engage with Con Ed and to establish a process whereby Con Ed can make information available about those interconnection points that it thinks present advantages. I certainly expect from talking to them that the Con Ed Hub would be one of the locations that they would like to talk about. I can't say much more than that, because, but we do expect significant Con Ed to step up and to take some proactive steps to inform developers of where Con Edison thinks there are cost-effective interconnection points on its system, including the hub.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. And last, if you or maybe Bob could speak to briefly, Commissioner Howard referred to proposals before the legislature that were not taken up this year. I actually just wanted to raise an issue. Now, obviously, the caveat, it has not been considered by the governor. So this is all hypothetical unless and until when that happens. But a bill was approved by both houses of the legislature. Much of the attention around it had to do with a park alienation piece, but my understanding is that piece of legislation was far more broad than a lot of the media reports surrounding it. Just curious if you have, again, with the caveat being it has not received final review by the governor. That having been said, can you speak at all to the effect of that bill on everything that we are taking up both today and previously, and how that may or may not change going forward, offshore wind and future projects.
So I'm going to give you a very limited response. I read the legislation, and it applied. There's an aspect to it that would amend public authority, the part of the public authority law related to NYSERDA's authority, and it applies prospectively beyond 9 gigawatts, and we're not beyond 9 gigawatts right now. So the easiest answer for you is that even if the governor signs that bill, and that's going to be completely up to the governor. It wouldn't apply until after 9 gigawatts, so it has nothing to do with what's before you today.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Liz, thanks again, and Leka and the entire team. It's an important matter that we take up today. Thank you.
Commissioner Majori?
Thank you. I don't have any additional questions. I do want to thank you for addressing some questions I had offline. But between your presentation and some of the other discussion that went on, I don't have anything additional to say other than thank you for the presentation.
All right. Thank you, commissioners. Thank you, Liz. We'll now do a call for vote. My vote is in favor of the recommendation to address the public policy requirement for transmission planning as discussed today. Commissioner Berman, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Alisi? Yes. Commissioner Edwards?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Commissioner Valesky?
Yes.
Commissioner Majori?
Yes.
Okay. The item is approved and the recommendations are adopted. Thank you, everyone. We'll now move to the sixth and final item for discussion today. Item 101, case 21-G-0577, which relates to the St. Lawrence Gas Rate Plan. Presented today, we have Administrative Law Judge Michael Clark. Judge Clark, happy to see you. All right, and when you have time, please begin.
My name is Michael Clark. I'm the administrative law judge assigned to preside over this proceeding. Before you is a draft order that would establish a gas delivery rate plan for Liberty Utilities, St. Lawrence Gas Corporation, for a 3-year period beginning on November 1st, 2022, and continuing until October 31st, 2025. The order adopts the terms of a joint proposal executed by Liberty, trial staff of the Department of Public Service, and multiple interveners. The Utility Intervention Unit of the Division of Consumer Services of the New York State Department of State is the only other party to this proceeding. UIU, which represents the interests of residential and small commercial customers, does not oppose the joint proposal. Today, I'll briefly provide some background information, detail the agreement's revenue requirements, and then highlight some of the notable provisions in the joint proposal. Liberty provides gas service to approximately 17,000 customers in rural northern New York. For much of the last decade, 2 distinct areas in the company's service territory have been separated for rate-making purposes. The legacy area, comprised of certain communities in St. Lawrence County and a portion of Lewis County, and the expansion area, comprised of other communities in St. Lawrence County and a portion of Franklin County. Rates applicable to both areas were most recently established by a commission order issued in July 2016 and continued in a commission order issued in October 2019. The latter order called for the 2 areas to remain separate until the expansion area became self-supporting, meaning that base rate revenues there would be sufficient to cover the company's cost of service there without having to be subsidized by legacy area revenues, or until January 31st, 2023, whichever occurred earlier. If the expansion area was not self-supporting by January 31st, 2023, the 2019 order provided that company shareholders would be required to write down plant in service to a level allowing it to be self-supporting without subsidization from legacy area customers. Against this backdrop, the company commenced this proceeding in November 2021, seeking a one-year revenue increase of approximately $3.5 million, which the company asserted would result in a 13% annual bill increase for the average residential customer, an 18% increase for the average commercial customer, and a 5% increase for the industrial service class. This filing pertained only to the legacy area of Liberty's distribution system. In a supplemental filing dated January 31st, 2022, the company submitted various corrections and updates to its initial filing and increased its revenue request upward to approximately $4.3 million. The supplemental filing also contained the company's proposal for consolidating the legacy area and the expansion area, including that any potentially necessary write-down be deferred for up to 5 years. In direct testimony filed on June 3rd, 2022, staff recommended a one-year revenue requirement increase of about $1.2 million, or $3.1 million less than the company requested in its initial filing, in its supplemental filing, Although staff agreed with certain aspects of the company's proposal for consolidating the legacy and the expansion areas, it argued that any deferral of the write-down would be inconsistent with the Commission's direction in the 2019 order. Staff also took issue with the company's proposed rate allocation and rate design methodologies, as did multiple interveners. Settlement negotiations began shortly after rebuttal testimony was filed, successfully culminating in the joint proposal submitted on March 31st. As I indicated earlier, the joint proposal would establish a 3-year rate plan beginning on November 1st, 2022, and continuing until October 31st, 2025. The joint proposal recommends base delivery revenue increases of $2,579,086 in rate year 1, $647,278 in rate year 2, and $809,922 in rate year 3. Recognizing that the considerable increase proposed for rate year 1 would pose a significant burden for ratepayers, the joint proposal would permit the company to instead raise revenues at levelized amounts of $1.38 million in rate year 1, $1.93 million in rate year 2, and $1.94 million in rate year 3. This levelization would result in a 2.97% total bill increase in all 3 rate years. For the typical residential heating customer, the revenue changes would lead to a $7.84 increase in the average monthly bill in rate year 1, a $6.06 increase in rate year 2, and a $6.11 increase in rate year 3. Although the revenue increases recommended in the joint proposal are significant, the company has not filed for a delivery rate increase since 2015, and its last approved rate increase became effective in 2018. Rate year 3 of the company's most recent rate plan. Since then, various company costs and expenses have risen, including those related to labor, health insurance, inflation, property taxes, and pensions, which are primary factors driving the requested revenue increase. It is notable that the revenue requirements reflected in the joint proposal are considerably reduced from the company's initial proposal. As previously stated, the company originally sought a $3.5 million increase and adjusted that request upward to $4.3 million in its supplemental filing dated January 31st, 2022. While staff's original recommended revenue increase was $1.2 million, staff now maintains that the proposed revenue increases over the course of the 3-year rate term are a reasonable compromise between its, Liberty's, and the other parties' litigation positions. In that regard, multiple interveners characterizes the proposed revenue requirements as the most challenging aspects of the joint proposal. Multiple interveners nevertheless adds that the proposed revenue requirements have been pared back to the extent practicable while still enabling the company to maintain system reliability and integrity and to perform all other core utility functions. The joint proposal allows a 9.2% return on equity with a common equity ratio of 48% and includes an earnings sharing mechanism that is triggered if the company's actual return exceeds 9.7%. The cost of capital terms set forth in the joint proposal are reasonable given current economic conditions, and they compare favorably with those approved by the Commission in other recent utility rate proceedings. Additionally, the earnings sharing mechanism acts as a safeguard against potential over-earning and ensures that ratepayers share in any efficiency gains realized by the company. The joint proposal sets forth the revenue allocation and rate design methodologies agreed upon by the signatory parties following extensive and detailed negotiations necessitated primarily by staff's and MI's dissatisfaction with the company's proffered allocated cost of services study and by staff's proposal to transition from a declining block rate structure to a flat rate structure, which multiple interveners argued could unfairly result in customers with high usage subsidizing those with lower usage. The joint proposal reflects a compromise involving a uniform service class increase and a rate structure designed to recover a portion of the revenue increase via both fixed and variable charges. The joint proposal's overall revenue allocation and rate design methodologies, supporting a gradual transition to a flat rate structure, equitably balance New York's conservation goals while mitigating bill impacts on large customers. The joint proposal also presents a consensus resolution to any issues surrounding consolidation of the legacy area and the expansion area, and will require the company to write down $4.5 million. Legacy area customers will not subsidize expansion area customers, and future company rate filings will reflect a single consolidated cost of service, achieving the Commission goal of eliminating the distinctive treatment between the two areas as expressed in the Commission's 2019 order. This is an equitable, fact-driven solution that comports with the 2019 order. Turning to the company's low-income program, the parties recognize that energy costs represent a significant burden for low-income individuals and families. The joint proposal accordingly recommends that the company's existing two-tiered program be expanded to 4 tiers, with monthly discounts reflecting the Commission's Energy Affordability Program goal of a 3% energy burden for gas-only customers. The program would thus identify and allocate more funding to customers who are in greater need of assistance, while also being consistent with Commission directives that discounts be properly tailored to the specific needs of such customers. Finally, the joint proposal offers an ample basis upon which the Commission can determine that it complies with New York's Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. It creates processes for ensuring that the company approaches extensions of service with appropriate consideration of the CLCPA's emission reduction targets. For any proposed entitlement projects exceeding 500 feet, the company will consult with DPS staff prior to beginning construction and then file a report with the Commission, including non-pipe alternatives that were considered, documentation that the company informed potential customers of alternatives to natural gas heating, and information on the proposed project's consistency with attainment of emissions limits established pursuant to the CLCPA. Regarding any future proposals to extended service beyond what is required by the Commission's rules regarding the company's obligation to serve, the joint proposal requires the company to submit a petition to the Commission before beginning construction. The company must explain how its proposal is consistent with CLCPA emissions goals and provide information regarding project cost estimates, projected natural gas and alternative energy costs, and any non-pipe alternatives that were considered. The company cannot proceed with such a proposal unless and until the Commission authorizes it to do so. The joint proposal discontinues the company's Carbon Reduction Initiative program, which provided customers with incentives for high-efficiency gas conversions. It also requires that the company implement a behavioral demand response program, pursuant to which it would request that customers reduce usage during peak times, thus lowering their own utility bills, reducing the amount of gas consumed, and furthering achievement of the CLCPA's greenhouse gas emission targets. The The company would also be required to institute a residential methane detector pilot program, which will allow for the quicker discovery and repair of any potentially leaking pipes, thus minimizing the release of greenhouse gases and improving gas safety. The joint proposal also requires the company to submit an annual report reflecting its upstream, local distribution, and end-use greenhouse gas emissions, and it must provide gas conservation messaging to customers and refer new applicants for gas service to the New York State Clean Energy Program, where they can learn about electrification options and discover if they are eligible for any applicable rebates. Based on the foregoing, the Commission can confidently determine that the joint proposal is in the public interest. Indeed, the joint proposal appropriately ensures the company's continued provision of safe and reliable service at just and reasonable rates. Its terms comply with the CLCPA, and it is consistent with regulatory action required by or taken in other Commission proceedings. That concludes my presentation, but I'm certainly available for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Judge Clark. I think you stole my notes because you ended almost as how I was going to begin, and I couldn't agree more. I know this was a difficult process, but I appreciate where you arrived and how you got there in terms of working with the other parties. And I do agree that this is consistent with regulatory action and aligned with the CLCPA. So thank you for your work in bringing this toward us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Berman.
Thank you. First of all, it's been a pleasure over these last 2 years getting to know you and sort of your cutting your teeth on the rate cases and sort of seeing how thoughtful you approach them and take seriously comments from the commissioners and really try to be ensuring that we get a full factual record and a detailed analysis and making sure that we have a draft order that really sets forth why it is or is not in the public interest. And I appreciate that. I think there are three things that I want to sort of touch upon. One is that I was struck by, and it's in the draft order, multiple interveners characterizing the proposed revenue requirements, and you spoke about it, as the most challenging aspects of the joint proposal. And they, multiple interveners, was supportive, adding really that the proposed revenue requirements have been pared back to the extent practicable, while still enabling the company to maintain system reliability and integrity and perform all other core utility functions. And I think that's accurate. But I am struck by the fact that we are challenged in the rate cases, especially in rate cases that have a lot of CLCPA and state policies. And it's not just New York, it's other state policies in other states, where the rate cases have to sort of take into account all of that and how that can really be challenging in trying to deal with the rate impacts. So I point that out because I think that for me, the important thing is that we are mindful that we have to ensure that the utilities are maintaining system reliability and integrity and performing their core utility functions. And that is a be-all and end-all, and that takes precedent, and that when we are looking at what may need to be pared back, we cannot shirk our responsibility on reliability and safety and the core responsibilities. And so we have to just, I think through that carefully. Clearly is done here, but we have challenges in other areas in sort of allowing other things outside of our core utility functions take precedent or push through, and sometimes we forget to just get back to what's our ultimate responsibility. So that's the first. The second is I am mindful that there is implementation of IT issues. IT issues and trying to implement them, any large project can be challenging, whether it's a utility or a company or frankly in my own home. And so I look at this and I feel that the order recognizes that IT implementation challenges can be something that is a problem, and how do we do it in a way that we are making sure that any hiccups that are that are not the fault of ratepayers, and perhaps hiccups that should have been looked at more carefully by the utility, that the cost on that is borne by the company and not the ratepayers. And can you talk a little bit about how we would assess, utility IT implementation and the rollout of that and the prudency of that?
The company's customer first performance is going to be evaluated through regular capital spending reporting and service quality monitoring. The department has recently begun utilizing an internal automated system that prepares charts almost in real time so that staff can identify trends and take corrective action as necessary. So they are on top of that. And as you mentioned, the order does emphasize that any rollout problems will be borne, the costs associated with them will be borne by the company and not ratepayers.
I think that's a positive, and I think that sort of looking at it before it's launched is really helpful, and that's really sort of, I think, an improvement in our regulatory oversight, and with the companies, I think, now recognizing that IT implementation can be very challenging and needing to kind of forecast out and plan for that. So I appreciate that. Then the third prong, which is really one that I struggle with, and it sort of hits on both the company-funded extension capital projects and the entitlement projects and expansion exceeding 500 feet. So in this JP, it established a process outside the current rate case for these capital projects, non-pipe alternatives, as well as the gas extensions. And history, most recently in a few rate cases, has left me a little bit concerned about this process. It is really important when we're looking at, and I've spoken about this before, but it's really important when we're looking at joint proposals and coming together for people to support it, that some of the post-future actions on a project, whether it's a non-pipeline alternative or a pipeline or a gas expansion, shouldn't be decided in sort of the rollout of when a petition will come and what the petition will look like in a joint proposal. It may be that you recognize in the joint proposal that, okay, we're not going to be able to get to this here, and so this isn't going to stop us from supporting this joint proposal, but we recognize that this capital project, this non-pipe alternative, whatever the issue is going to be addressed in the future, and maybe giving some framework ideas of what that may look like. For me, the challenge is that from the history of other things that have been sort of left to, all right, and the utility will come back to us with the petition to expand or to, lift a moratorium or to decide something related to, in particular, most recently, gas. It doesn't leave a lot of flexibility to the commission, and in times the process itself can get murky and confused and take on another life of its own, that if it had been decided within the rate case or had been decided without being tagged with, well, you have to do this petition a certain way, per the joint proposal, it locks us in a way that I think can be clunky, perhaps improper, and perhaps creating more challenges than if we were just to not keep it in the joint proposal and to decide it singularly or to resolve it in the rate case. So I guess I'm looking for some understanding, because I'm still sort of left a little concerned with, we'll take the first prong, which is the reporting requirement for the company-funded extension capital projects, and what the purpose of that is and what exactly we're telling them to do.
Well, I think that the intent is actually the opposite of what you were suggesting. It's not to lock the commission in. It's to grant the commission the discretion to approve or not approve any proposed projects down the line, and to avoid having any kind of uncertain funding included in the revenue requirement approved by the joint proposal. So it's an information piece. The company will have to inform or advise prospective customers of alternatives, and then the company will have to inform the commission as to what it's doing, how much it's going to cost, what the impacts are regarding CLCPA compliance. So certainly I think it's the opposite of trying to lock the commission into a particular position.
And I think that's helpful. I agree with you that that's the intent. I think history has shown that sometimes the intent has fallen away, and it then becomes a much more complicated process that doesn't actually allow any movement forward in resolving some of the issues, except to say no to the project or come back later again. For the non-pipe alternative consideration for entitlement of capital projects, where we are saying prior to beginning construction, the company has to consult with staff and then file a report with the secretary detailing the cost of the proposed projects, alternatives that were considered to the project, and documentation establishing that the company informed prospective customers of alternatives to natural gas heating, and information on the proposed project's consistency with attainment of statewide greenhouse gas emission goals as articulated in the CLCPA. I just also want to remember that and kind of highlight that customers who want gas, customers who are, given alternatives to natural gas heating, we have to be very careful that we're not delaying their own choice, and we'll also have to be careful that we're not somehow trying to push them away from something, and that we are really allowing the company to offer viable options and make sure that we're being careful not to insert our own desires in that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Thank you.
Do you want me to respond?
Sure, yeah.
Again, I
especially
think,
since you said it made sense. Yeah.
I think it makes sense. But again, I think the intent of this provision is really just to add another level of staff involvement to infrastructure, gas infrastructure projects. I should add, I think there may have been some confusion surrounding this, but forecast entitlement projects are included in the revenue requirements in the joint proposal. So that's cleared for the entitlement pieces.
Right.
I think, again, the intent is to educate consumers about potential options that they may or may not have. And on the backside, the company is bringing the information regarding its experiences with these customers to the commission so that that information can inform future policy planning,
Right.
particularly in the gas planning proceeding.
Right. And I think we have to be very careful to not become barriers to that, and also make sure that we are allowing the customer and the utility to work together on what makes sense without making them jump through a million hoops, and it's never going to be good enough because we want you to just say no, right? So the other thing is that regarding the entitlement projects exceeding 500 feet, where this is providing a level of review. This is the level of review that the company would not otherwise be subjected to. And so the company, which is in support of it because of the joint proposal, is really looking at a detailed main extension review procedures that's going to ensure that the company's most significant future investments in the new gas infrastructure will incorporate consideration of consistency with the CLCPA's greenhouse gas emission reduction goals and the possibility of non-pipe alternatives. But I just want to underscore, this is something they would not have had to do. So we should make sure that we are not sort of now making them have to jump through even more hoops in this process because they are voluntarily agreeing to this. And so at the back end, we can't now say, okay, great, you agreed to it, and now we're going to make it even harder for you and just keep, pounding on that issue. I think that's really important to understand. They are supporting this, but if it wasn't in this, they would not necessarily be subjected to this new review process. Is that correct?
I think that's fair. I suppose I struggle with the word review. It's more a consultation with staff, and I think the purpose is just to provide staff with the information that this is ongoing, this is what we're doing.
Right.
And it is the type of review that staff does do, even for entitlement projects during the rate case. So they do look at what the company's expansion plans are, regardless of entitlement or not. And I think that taking it outside of the rate case and continuing that kind of review process during the rate plan and not while a rate case is under review takes into consideration the realities that we are in a transition period, or there's a lot of uncertainties that exist around the future of gas and utilities in this state that didn't exist even a couple of years ago. So.
Right. Okay. I think that's all helpful. I think this conversation in terms of making sure that we're all on the same page of what the level of review and scrutiny is important. And I think that it's also something that as we move forward and are looking at perhaps other joint proposals, we have to be very careful that we don't start looking to dictating what petitions should or should not look like, and make very careful choices. And perhaps some of the policy decisions that are baked in have to get decided before we delve into it in the rate case itself. And there's some generic proceedings that we're looking at that. Perhaps there are others where it might be helpful to sort of issue-specific things need to make sure that we are not sort of just holding out for, or we're not deciding something because we have one or two holdouts on some issue specific, and so, but for them getting what they want, they won't support the joint proposal. Totally understand that. Holistically, though, the joint proposal needs to be in the public interest for the customers of the utility. So just,
I agree. And I think that that's a fair observation. At the same time, the utilities do have the right during a rate plan to always petition for projects that they want to accelerate prior to filing a new rate plan. So at certain times it can be helpful to try and define the universe of certain petitions that are likely to come down the road during that 3-year term. So
Yeah, it's a difficult issue in trying to strike the right balance. And so I raise it only because I think that here we are, I think, trying to strike that right balance. And some of the issues we've had in other rate cases or petitions that come after the rate cases have been particularly challenging, and perhaps it's food for thought in what that means for us. And I will say this process is very different from the most recent one where there was a consultant charged with performing a review based on demand forecasts. And I just think that there's, and I had a difference of opinion with the majority. So, I don't need to rehash that, but I do think that it lends itself to conversation, just in terms of, are we all on the same page in how we handle things? And I think that's a good thing. So thank you.
All right. Commissioner Alisi.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, good work. It seems we've been saying that all day long, but it is good work, and right in line with all of the other presentations for today. This meets the challenge as has been presented. Fair and equitable, satisfies the needs of the CLCPA. Reasonable compromise, which, as I recall from my childhood, my mother used to say at the dinner table, you won't always get what you want, but you'll always get what you need. And I think this satisfies the public need. So, good job.
Thank you. Commissioner Edwards?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Howard?
Yeah, again, I will join the chorus of thanking you for a good job well done. I think this case shows that regardless of the size of the company, the complexities are the same. And actually, in some cases, the resources of the company and the petitioners are less, which makes it harder for you, Judge, to parse the Sphinx, so to speak. But again, good work, and I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Commissioner Valesky?
Thank you for the efforts. I have no questions.
Commissioner Bajori?
Thank you. I don't have any questions. I'll just a couple quick comments. Commissioner Howard has pointed out in the past that among the very many things that staff does particularly well, rate cases are, a great example of that. The process is thorough, it's public, it's participatory, it's transparent, and I think this is an example of those practices coming together to achieve a balance between priorities that are sometimes in tension. I've said before that nobody wants to raise rates, but this is not a slapdash process, and the point that Commissioner Berman quoted from some of the comments that the revenue requirements were pared back to the extent practicable also stood out to me. So I think this achieves quite a bit through a process that everyone with an interest had an option to participate in to arrive at the best outcome. I also note, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think there's any commentary in here challenging the conclusion that this JP achieves CLCPA goals. And to do that for a gas rate case, I think is worth noting. And I agree with that conclusion. So I don't like raising rates, but I think that this is a product of good work, and I do agree that it's in the public interest. So I intend on voting yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'll now bring us to a call for a vote. My vote is in favor of the recommendation to adopt the terms of the joint proposal as discussed. Commissioner Berman?
Yes.
Commissioner Lisi?
Yes.
Commissioner Edwards?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Commissioner Valesky?
Yes.
Commissioner Majori?
Yes.
Okay, the item is approved and the recommendations are adopted. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Judge. Okay, and with that, we'll now move on to the consent agenda. Do any commissioners wish to comment on or recuse from voting on any of the items on today's consent agenda? I'll begin with Commissioner Berman.
Yeah, I have a couple of items that I want to make some comments on. Item 264, which is a draft order approving the request of NYSEG and RG&E to extend the maximum suspension period through and including October 18th and to be made whole for the delay. Last session, myself and a couple of other commissioners did raise some concerns on the needing to extend the suspension period and the challenges with that and trying to meet the statutory 11-month obligation to decide a rate case. We're now faced here with the joint proposal having been filed, needing to be SAPed and needing folks to be able to have an opportunity to comment on that. And I think that's important. And also then for staff and then the commission to have an opportunity to take those comments and look at the joint proposal and then look towards a draft order that is reflective and is in the public interest. So giving the extra time makes sense. There's two things that I just want to point out, though, is that October 18th is the week after the October 12th Public Service Commission session. So if we are deciding it after that session, we're really looking at November for a decision. Every month that there is a delay means that we are having to incorporate an additional month to be spread over the years of the rate plan, effectively increasing rates by whatever that percentage is. And I think that that's something that is really important for us to look at and ensure that we are trying to get under the hood of the issues with the extension of the suspension period. And, you know, kind of my understanding here and support here is because of the timing with the joint proposal. But I would like us to more holistically look at how can we make sure that we are shaving off, you know, the suspension periods, the need to extend the suspension periods. How do we help collaborate better? How do we look at, you know, stakeholders involved in rate cases, settlement discussions in a way that helps us collaborate, but also helps address some of the challenges that may be there that have sort of made us now more on the side of continually looking at extensions of the suspension period. So those are the two things that I raise on that item. Item 265 is the next item. I'm going to come back to that. That's the energy broker item, and I have some sort of detailed comments on that. Item 267, I'm concurring, consistent with my voting record on this. I do look forward to addressing the more larger energy efficiency initiative issues, but I did vote for similar with Con Ed, so I will do the same in concurrence here. Item 367, which is the Clean Energy Standard Backstop Mechanism item. I do want to take a moment to explain sort of my concern here. there's a couple of things that sort of stand out for me from a process wise that impacts me in looking at this substantively. The first level is something that I've talked about is when you look at our preliminary and final session agenda and you look at the item number, we are still using the generic case. So people would not recognize specifically that the item that we're going to be taking up is related to the Clean Energy Standard backstop mechanism. I just find that troubling. I know I sound like a broken record, but I do think that if we are looking at having transparency, we should be clear in the agenda items. It's legally sufficient, but I just don't think it's prudent to not let people know exactly what petition we're looking at or what the substance of it is. Especially when you look at case number 15E0302, it's the most, I think it's one of the most massive ones since competitive opportunities proceeding. So the other is, this is a petition that was filed by NYSERDA in July 2021. Now, with all fairness to NYSERDA, it was a petition that they were asked to file back in November of 2016. It was the financial backstop mechanism. August 1st, 2016 was the Clean Energy Standard, and then November was the Clean Energy Standard Administrative Order. And there was, at that time, there was a recognition that we might have to address sort of the backstop mechanism. So, kind of fast forward, it made sense. The filing happened in July 2021, and a recognition that, they were putting forward their proposal, NYSERDA's proposal, in how to address this potential backstop mechanism that they might need. So the thing for me is, though, we're deciding this petition almost 2 years from when it was filed. So I initially had a why, like what's making this now all of a sudden have to be decided. Now, for me, I have spent a great deal of time kind of going over it and understanding what this is and what this is not. I am leaning towards the side that there is no boogeyman here. This isn't a backdoor way of addressing, some of the large-scale renewable petitions that we may have here, or trying to increase the budgets in a way that sort of makes it a grab for more money. This really is, and this is where I feel comfortable, is that we've understood that if there is a shortfall, anytime you start a new program, you have to have some, cash on hand to help roll this out, right? So that this process was for NYSERDA to use this Clean Energy Fund money and look to the electric distribution companies for that funding. And that's with the Clean Energy Standard, the RECs, the ZECs, et cetera. And the programs, they should totally be fully funded to the extent that they are deemed prudent. The backstop mechanism then is addressing really two issues. Cash flow, working capital is one, and the second is uncollectible accounts. So this draft order uses this backstop mechanism to address the existing deficit in the ZEC program, which was created by NYPA's inability to collect those costs from its customers via existing supply contracts. And just so you know, that sounds like I'm taking a hitting NYPA with it. I don't mean that. Their inability to collect those costs from its customers really did make sense because they had existing supply contracts that didn't have this sort of mechanism in there in how to collect for it, right? So I feel like everyone in this case is really trying to figure out how to properly handle it, and make sure that we're moving forward in a way that is addressing the deficit issues. We had a draft order that allocated the current ZEC deficit, which is significant, 33 plus, to all electric utilities, and LIPA was based on a load ratio share. That order was not supportive of, but I understand, and the deficit issue. Load ratio share is a different issue. But this rate mechanism in place at the electric utilities for the recovery of the backstop mechanism cost is applicable to the delivery of supply to NYPA customers. So feel comfortable that this is really trying to get at how do we do all this. We're addressing here the NYPA issue. We're addressing the collection of the deficit that NYPA has to deal with. We're going to have to address it from the LIPA customers. That's going to come. But we are really looking at this in a way that the backstop, and I want to be very clear, this backstop mechanism, the need to invoke it should be a rare occurrence and is only a place to address completely unusual circumstances, but it should be infrequent, and it should be something that we are not using as a way to refresh our coffers. So what the draft order does, it develops this true up process from month to month over and under collections, and will significantly reduce, I think, if we do it this way, significantly reduce the need for the backstop. But we have to be cognizant of not having collected, but then of collecting and using the funding to sweep, because that will be challenging. And just keep in mind, our last order addressing some of the CES payments, we're trying to not keep having this, over collection, right? That we're trying to have where we're collecting only what we really need. So we're not going to have, in a lot of our program orders, we say, okay, we're going to do this program, we're going to expand it, we're going to do this, and it's okay because we're going to use uncollectible funding and we're going to sweep it. That mindset has to change, because remember, when you have a program that you think is a good one, it should be fully funded. But if we are trying to expand it, saying it's not a big deal because we got these, we got these other things we're going to sweep, we can't keep using the rainy day fund, and we have to just be mindful of that. So I look at this as the changes that are taking place in 2025, the way Tier 1 rec costs are allocated and recovered from LSEs will significantly, again, reduce the need to invoke the backstop. So I am comfortable voting for this, again, because this is not supposed to be, let's use this backstop mechanism now as, a thing that we do. And in fact, we are very, I think, prudent in saying, look, if you NYSERDA think that you're going to need to invoke the backstop, you're going to have to petition the commission, and you're going to have to go through a process of really showing what's happening and making sure that you have commission approval to do that, which may need that we then need to pivot in a lot of the different programming and the funding and all of that. But we are really mindful that the steps that we're doing for that is intended to make sure that if you need to invoke the backstop mechanism, you really shouldn't, we shouldn't be there. But if you do, we understand it's probably because of some really, unusual circumstance, and therefore we're going to make very carefully sure, and frankly, we're going to look at what happened that led us to that in the first place. I was very concerned, and after sort of really going over it carefully, talking to incredible staff who really walked through it, that these are completely unrelated to the petitions of ACE New York and others seeking modification to their REC and OREC agreements, and in no way allows NYSERDA to pay generators more than their contracted amounts. So the boogeyman issue, I fully vetted, feel very comfortable that it's not there, and I am going to concur. I felt it was important to explain this process because the same way I had the knee-jerk reaction to not appreciating where we got, I felt like I should take some time to explain it, perhaps to others who might be interested, but also, again, historically, I've been here since when we first did the August 1st, 2016 CES petition, and then the November one. And I really wanted to make sure that folks understood sort of the history and the importance of this, because I do think this is important. And so, all right, sorry, belabored that a little bit, but I just thought that was important. The next one is 376, which is the New York Sun mid-review. So I initially, up until last evening, thought that I might be voting no on this item. I, again, saw a lot of boogeymen. And I think it's important for me to recognize that when we're looking at this, there's a couple of layers, right? I have to get out of my head in when I never supported the initial New York Sun being done without legislative action, to give us some of that. And so there's a history of me voting no on a lot of the New York Sun issues. And then, so here we have this midpoint review. It would have been easy for me to just vote no. But I don't think that that is helpful when part of it is now looking and saying, okay, what is this midpoint review actually doing? How are we setting ourselves up to move forward? And in this case, maybe I wouldn't have designed it this way, but, and maybe I do things a little differently, but this is, the way this is done, it's a critical design component of the New York Sun program for NYSERDA to have the ability to have flexibility to revise various program incentive rates. The trend here is that when NYSERDA works with our staff in making adjustments, they have made downward adjustments on the incentives. They've shown a prudency in doing so. Now, these are not large-scale renewables. This is really specific to the New York Sun program and is not the larger-scale renewable programs. This order is really giving them flexibility to not have to go through a belabored process with the commission to get some ability to make incentive rate adjustments that make sense and that are not, again, in this large scale, massive process. If they were to go through all the hoops that would get us to voting yes or no on that, the need for it would be problematic, right? They would have had it would have been like, well, you can apply, but by the time you apply, people have gone away, right? So for me, I look at this as important for us to give clear direction to our staff to work with NYSERDA as prudently under the program design to have that flexibility. And so it enables NYSERDA to prudently utilize the funding to achieve the distributed solar goals and allows NYSERDA to make these adjustments as necessary in a timely manner and responding to evolving market conditions, including anticipated future federal guidance on the IRA. Now, these adjustments have traditionally always been made after consultation and concurrence with our DPS staff team, who make sure to do so in a way that is having a fiduciary responsibility to the ratepayers. So here I think that's really helpful, and I'm comfortable with that. The order also, very importantly to me, says, look, as to your wanting to perhaps increase the prevailing wage budget, you cannot do that unless you come back to the commission and make a filing that the commission as a body will approve and look at. So no, you cannot increase the budget for prevailing wage. And in fact, that was one of the sticklers to me, not supporting the commission becoming a prevailing wage board. But I'm comfortable here that we are really making sure that they'd have to come back to us. The second thing is we say, look, we understand that you are looking at 10 megawatt procurements, above and beyond that. That's not what we're doing. We're not increasing that right here. This order does not address that issue. And then the last thing that I think is helpful is NYSERDA is being asked to come and do a filing on information on the IRA and explain how it intends to deal with a lot of the IRA things. Now, the IRA is an implementation of the IRA is a constantly moving issue. So NYSERDA can come to us today and tomorrow things can change. It is important, though, for us to start saying, what is the plan? What are the things that are being done? How is this linking? We're asking the utilities to tell us what they're doing. NYSERDA needs to help give some direction and to put in a docket some meat on the bones. And that's what this, I think, intends to do. And so for that, I will be supporting this item. So the larger issue for me is 265, which is the energy broker item. I truly struggled with this, and I'm frankly uncomfortable with the legislation and then how we are implementing that legislation. So my personal take is that legislation was signed, it was Senate Bill S9414, and it required the registration of retail energy brokers and consultants with a bonding requirement, disclosure of broker compensation to customers, prohibition of certain rebates, and it set up a registration process. That legislation was clunky at best and challenging. I think that the original intent of the legislation was really to kind of probably look at how to address the relationships with building maintenance operators, perhaps some unscrupulous ones, without the owner's knowledge, cutting deals, and what that looks like. So the bill, which really could have been as simple as, disclose if you have monetary relationships here and, what's going on. It morphed into something way beyond that. It requires brokers to disclose how they got paid and how much they got paid. It's fine, right? Disclose. But this transformation really became a poorly drafted, unclear, everybody sort of pancaked on, and it inexplicably looked on its face like a good consumer protection bill. So I guess it was signed, but it's not. And in fact, it actually may not only create a lot of workload for not only our staff, but everyone else. It may create a bureaucratic sort of registration process, but it also morphs into us getting away from our core functions and responsibilities over rates into something that, we cannot control the relationships between the building maintenance operators and commercial vendors. So the staff. So what happened was we had an issue where legislation has an effective date of June 21st, 2023. And so in the rush after the bill is signed to get this out the door, and I understand that, no one took the time to talk to at least me as a commissioner in, what do you think? How should we handle that? We didn't have a proceeding initiated that we said, yes, we agree, we're going to, initiate this proceeding pursuant to the legislation. We've done that before. We didn't have an opportunity to give our 2 cents on what this looked like. We didn't have an opportunity to say these definitions in the legislation doesn't make sense in our world. There's challenges. What is an energy broker? What's an energy consultant? How does this relate? We have a whole host of things. It's not just ESCOs, there are DERs, there's CCAs, there's renewable energy hubs. Like the list goes on, right? And so there was a rush, and staff was pushed to put out a staff white paper or staff proposal to try, in good faith, address this complete sort of, kitchen sink. The problem is that staff, well-meaning, just like the legislation well-meaning, wound up putting it and making it very broad to cover a lot of things. And in theory, that sounds good, right? But again, remember, we are focused on the rates. We are focused on consumer protection in a way that makes sense between what we're doing. So now this sort of, I think, inserting our PSC authority here into these commercial arrangements, frankly, between sophisticated entities, we don't really have a business in and we shouldn't have a business in trying to micromanage and regulate this registration process and this relationship that, again, we cannot get involved in a lot of that, right? So this registration process is not necessarily going to get at the root cause of how do we deal with bad, unscrupulous people and allow the good people to flourish. The issue is a lot of good energy brokers and energy consultants actually you want in the marketplace. They help make sure that you're getting the best price. They help make sure you're getting the best deals. They work with folks, and the good ones actually make sure that they're keeping, the marketers honest and following the rules. So for me, I see this as getting so far outside of our comfort level that it's not going to be helpful. Now, the draft order tries to claw back the staff white proposal, frankly, because we got a lot of comments that said, oh my God, what are you doing? I don't understand. I don't understand the legislation. The proposal is perhaps well-meaning, is unintended, and it's going to capture a lot of people that doesn't make any sense. Again, remember, a lot of these energy brokers and energy consultants are also, again, the ones who are helping with energy audits. We want them out there, good ones. So, the law, yes, we are stuck with it. Got signed, we're stuck with it. I think that we have a challenge, and the draft order has been revised to reflect sort of addressing sort of some of these challenges, which is that we're going to have a stakeholder process, technical conference, and we're going to try to work through. A lot of people are going to have 1,000,001 questions, 1,000,001. Our staff is going to need to be trained on this. Our staff is going to need to work through this. We are going to take away from a lot of the work we need to do if we don't have more staff who are highly trained in this and working through that. And for what end? I'm not sure that this registration process is actually going to do anything to help customers in any real way. So this draft order recognizes we're going to have this process, and then people can ask questions. And we also recognize that we may have to make changes. We may have to make modifications. Yes, we have a lot of exceptions. You know, attorneys, don't worry, you're not considered an energy broker, an energy consultant in this. Yes, CCA administrators, you know, you're not considered that, though. Just remember, you have your own process and challenges there. And so this impossible situation, though, while we have this, I think, really good thing in terms of stakeholder process and then having to be prepared to come back to the commission to address it, we got stuck in that, well, you still have to file your registration form, and we're gonna decide yay or nay with it. So while we're on one hand saying, look, we're going to give you some breathing room, we understand, we're going to work with you, and we're going to come back, you still have to work, you still have to do it all. I think that's the disconnect. That you still have to do it all makes no sense if we're already recognizing the workload, the impossibility, the confusion, and we should wait on that piece till after we work through some of it. To me, the draft order should be a draft of what we're thinking, putting it out there as this is what we're thinking, work together, come back to us, because we know we're going to get it wrong. We know that there is a problem. And by the way, the elephant in the room is we also know that the legislation, the intent behind the legislation, while well-meaning, isn't actually, has morphed into this other thing that isn't actually going to be that helpful, and in fact may cause a lot more confusion, because some energy brokers, the good ones, and some energy consultants, the good ones, may decide not to play in this field anymore and go do other things that keeps them away from having to be bogged down with sort of a bureaucratic nightmare that's going to open them up to a lot of scrutiny that doesn't need to be there. Again, bad ones we don't want. Good ones we want. They provide viable service for customers, and that's helpful. So I am going to be voting no on this, and I'm going to be really saying, look, everybody needs to weigh in at that stakeholder conference, because it's coming back to the commission. I recognize the problem of having to do all this registration stuff, that may be problematic. Frankly, I think we should understand that has to just sit. Staff does not have the ability to do that, while they're also trying to. You want staff to come with stakeholders, open to listening rather than locked in. Well, this is what you have to do. Their staff is going to have a problem wearing these two hats, and I just don't think it's fair. So with that, I'm truly conscious of the hard, impossible work that got staff here. I appreciate really very much the understanding of the challenges And I think that we have an opportunity to be mindful of when we see legislation, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, we have to take a moment, breathe, and make sure that we fully look at all of the different issues and work with the commission who has to bless a lot of this stuff when that happens. And we also have to be able to push back on bad legislation, however well-meaning it is. So with that, I'll be voting no.
Commissioner Elise.
I'll be supporting the entire consent agenda.
Commissioner Edwards.
I have one recusal, item number 369.
Sorry, could you say that again? Item 369.
One recusal, 369, item number.
Thank you. Commissioner Howard.
On item 369, I will be no, consistent with my prior votes. Beyond that, I will good with the consent agenda.
Commissioner Valesky.
No comments on any items.
Commissioner Majori.
On item 266, I'm going to vote no. Other than that, I will be supporting the consent agenda.
Thank you, commissioners. I'll now move to a call for a vote. My vote is in favor of the recommendations on the consent agenda. Commissioner Berman, how do you vote?
Thank you. I vote yes, except 264, I concur. 265, I'm a no. 267, I concur, consistent with my voting record. 367 and 376, I concur. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Elise.
Yes on all items.
Commissioner Edwards.
Yes on all items with the exception of item number 369.
Thank you. Commissioner Howard.
Yes on all items except item 369, where I am a no.
Commissioner Valesky.
Yes on all items.
Commissioner Majori.
Yes on all items except for item 266, where I am voting no.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. The items are approved and the recommendations are adopted. Ms. Vigers, is there anything else to come before us today?
There is nothing further.
Thank you. And with that, I adjourn today's meeting.